The Warriors and Raptors, well, they're right back here in the Bay Area today following last night's thrilling game in Toronto. But, of course, the major storyline, not necessarily the win last night. It was the loss of Kevin Durant. Once again, coming out of the game with an injury, he went down in the second quarter with what GM Bob Myers classified as an Achilles injury. Now, Durant was cleared to play before last night's game by team doctors.
Let me tell you something about Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant loves to play basketball, and the people that questioned whether he wanted to get back to this team were wrong. And I'm not here to... He's one of the most misunderstood people. He's a good teammate. He's a good person. It's not fair.
As you can see, a very emotional Bob Myers there. Of course, a devastating injury for Kevin Durant. For more on the injury, we're joined here in studio by Anuruddh Misra, a doctor of sports medicine. Thanks for coming in. We are still awaiting the results, or awaiting, you know, the public results, the public release of the results of Kevin Durant's MRI. He's supposed to be having that today. That's going to tell us a lot about the severity of this injury. The Warriors believe this was a torn right Achilles, but there are different levels of severity.
No, that's right. Overwhelmingly, these kind of injuries, if they're not complete tears of the Achilles, can be managed non-operatively. Of course, it's just that. We're waiting to learn what is the extent of the tearing that we suspect to find on that imaging study. So that'll dictate a lot of what the future holds for him and, of course, the team and NBA going forward. Best
case scenario, worst case scenario.
So best case scenario is that we do find that it's torn, but not to the point that would necessitate him requiring surgery. Okay. Non-operative care is the cornerstone of the majority of these kind of injuries typically.
Obviously, we know the backstory. KD went down about a month ago during the playoffs, first round of the playoffs, with what was described at that time as a strained calf. Now, with an underlying injury like that, how much more likely does it make it that he would tear his Achilles?
Well, this is where it's a tough call. Is he have a baseline underlying injury that made him vulnerable for this? And it is always where the rubber hits the road. Is this someone who can or should be playing? Second guessing is very easy after the fact. But it is, yes, the case that that mild strain may have made him more vulnerable for this event, which we all saw last night. So no doubt. You know, it's hard to say. It's just like if you have someone who's hurt their back and needs to get back to a lifting job.
But obviously we heard from the GM, and the team has said that Kevin Durant was cleared by a team of doctors to play in last night's game, and obviously he wouldn't be playing if he didn't want to be out there personally. He didn't feel good about it, and he certainly looked good during the time he was out there. He was moving well. What is the process? What was the process, do you think, in this case, to clear him to come back into a game like this?
Multifactorial for sure. Well, first, the medical facts dictate a lot of one's expectations, no question about that. And then, of course, the context of the series. Obviously, it was an elimination game for the Warriors. And you have.
Do you think that factored into it, though?
I think it has.
In a hole?
I think it has an effect.
Should that factor in? I mean, from a medical standpoint, it seems like that shouldn't really matter where the series is.
It should not, but it often does when it comes to things like this, where if a person may be able to manage, that they will allow them to play. It's not uncommon or unheard of at all. But it is a judgment call fundamentally, taking into account all factors, including these, the medical facts, the exam, the motivation of the player, which we know those things, coupled with the context. So it's very much in the landscape of what's going on.
All right, well, let's look ahead here and talk about what is next for Kevin Durant. We don't know, what the level of severity of this injury, but let's say it's an Achilles injury. What is he looking at in terms of rehab? Sure. What's the time frame for him to come back, you think?
It'll come down to the severity of the findings on the MRI, and I think we've all been checking and trying to get an idea about what it's been looked at, and almost a lot of the day I've been trying to peek in on the latest on that. Well, basically, this is how I see it. If it's a complete tear, given his level of activity as a professional athlete, I would anticipate he's likely headed for surgery, and that rehabilitation can be anywhere between 6 months to 1 year. Should he not require surgery, and let's say we get a bit lucky here and it's not that bad, we may be looking at a 4 to 6 month rehabilitation independent of any surgical intervention. At least we can only hope that.
Okay, well, yeah, a lot riding on this MRI, right, and we will certainly await those results. All of Dub Nation will. Anuruddh Misra, a doctor of sports and internal medicine. Really appreciate your insight. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. We appreciate that.